Yo, welcome to Alpha Omega University. Welcome back, everybody. We are back with another episode here. Let me make sure everything's good. All right, we're firing. We're good. All right, hold on. All right, we're good. All right, yo, what's up? We got another episode today. We got episode 30. Kite. All right. I know that some of you guys are just like, yeah, you usually got longer name episodes, right? We had a movement and positioning, all that shit. This is like the shortest name we got, and it's because I didn't want to put too much into it. I think everybody understands what kite means in the game. However, it's one thing to understand what it is, right? And it's a whole different thing to actually like be able to apply it, be able to understand why it works and how it works. Those are completely separate things, and that's exactly why we're talking about it today. Today is a continuation of the series, the Calling Style series that we started a few weeks ago. I think it's been like 5 weeks ago or something. We did the first episode, which was the bait and switch. We did another episode on it 2 weeks ago, and now we got another episode today for Kite. That series is basically talking about the different styles in which a caller is going to call a ZvZ, right? So if you haven't been following, you're new, or there's the first, episode you've watched regarding this series, then basically we're going through different styles. And if you want to know like the overview of all the styles that we're going to go over, it was like episode 6 or 7. I remember it was like really early on, right? We made an episode where it was just literally titled Calling Styles, right? And that was, I just went by one the different styles in the game that there are to play, to ZvZ, to try to basically get the enemy off balance and to effectively beat them in some shape or form, right? So that was the whole point of that episode. And this series is basically taking each individual style and taking a really deep look at it to see why it works and how does it work, right? And then how we can implement it. Like what are the key functions? What are the key components of it, right? Like every style, and I have to say this because I had some people, messaging me talking about like, hey, like you were talking up this style and you were saying like it was so good, blah blah blah, and they were basically asking like, is this the best one in your opinion, that kind of stuff, right? So here's the thing, right? Every style has its goods and its bads, right? And there is no style that is perfect for every situation, okay? If I had to choose one calling style out of all the calling styles, and in fact I'll pop back and we can watch we can look at the schedule here real quick. And I'll tell you guys, so right now we're doing episode 30 Kite, right? And then the next one is going to be Sword, which is episode 32. Then 34 is going to be Crescent Pressure, right? So those are the last two other than the one today. And basically, people are asking like, okay, well, what do you think is the best? Bait and switch, tsunami, kite, sword, crescent pressure. Like, which one is the best, right? And the truth is that personally, I believe that kite is the best, but it's also the hardest to achieve. That doesn't mean that it's the best across the board, right? Let's go back to the video here because I know some of you guys like watching these videos. By the way, these videos that we're watching are all from the last week. Okay, they're all from the last week, from the last time we came on live, and so these are the episodes of the week. Basically, you're gonna see today a lot of escalation videos because for some reason Albion has just not been having a lot of ZvZing in the last few days, other than like a few, like 3, 4, 5 different guilds have been fighting, right? So or if there has been, I mean, I know there's been more fights, obviously, right? But like people haven't really been uploading too much, right? By the way, if you are like somebody that is uploading your ZvZ videos and you want to have more views, or you want to kind of show it off and show off your guild and show off your stuff, I love looking at smaller guilds, man. I love showcasing smaller guilds because smaller guilds is like where it all starts, right? To me, that's where it's fundamental, right? And so I love watching like the smaller stuff. But the problem is that when I YouTube stuff, right? When I look it up, I can't actually, like YouTube doesn't actually show me the stuff that is like very, very, like low views and stuff like that. So it tends to only show me like, the bigger ZvZ guilds, right? So send me the videos. I love that stuff, man. Send me the videos on Discord and I'll definitely be putting up here. I enjoy watching them, and I know that a lot of other people like watching them too. Anyway, back to the point, right? So not every style is perfect for every situation, right? Personally, I think Kite is the best because it's very flexible in the sense that it allows you to do a lot, right? And we'll get into it. Don't worry about that, right? We'll get into it, and I'll explain why later. But just to kind of like put it on the surface level, to me, this style that we're talking about today, Kite, is the best because it really helps slow things down for your Zerg. And when you slow things down for your Zerg, it helps a lot to all those players that they're not as experienced in ZvZ, right? Now, the problem with Kite is that it's really hard to do. So you need a strong core of people that know what they're doing already, right? Like, you cannot just go and be like, yeah, I'm going to run Kite, right? And then you have a bunch of brand new people. Like, the majority of your guild is brand new people. It's like, it's not going to, like, I don't want to say it's not going to work, but like, the truth is it's going to be really hard for you to get there, okay? It takes a lot. And we'll go through it, right? Obviously. But the thing is there is no one, you know, like one size fits all, right? Like, everybody wants to know, like, well, just tell me what the best is so I can just do that, you know, and then I can win. It's like, no, man, like, that's not the way it works. The whole point of this entire series is to show you guys all of the different types of styles in which callers go and call, in which they try to get the enemy caller off balance, the enemy Zerg off balance, right? And then after I show you all of them, it's up to you guys to essentially pick and choose which one you should do which days, right? Like, I'll put it this way: some Zergs, like Fax, let's say Fax, right? Just because it comes up to mind right now. Fax, Dazrun, he loves playing very how do I say this? Very touch go, right? Like, he'll engage you and then he'll kite you back. And he loves using that Kite style. If there's anybody that I would say right now is using more Kite than everybody else, it would be Dazrun. Right now, I'm not saying that that's all he does. No, and in fact, every good caller, and Dazrun is a good caller, right? But every good caller actually has multiple of these that they actually switch around, right? So like, sometimes I'll be calling on a Kite style, and then suddenly I flip it, and now I'm playing some bait and switch, right? And then I flip it again and I'm doing crescent pressure, right? And then you got to think of these as like rock paper scissors, right? So if the enemy starts playing a different way, then you got to play a different way to kind of counter that, okay? And so the best callers are the ones that are able to effectively change between all these different styles. This is why you got to know all of them. On top of that, if you understand all these different styles, then you understand what your enemy is doing. And it's not just oh yeah, the enemy's fucking engaging on me, they're doing whatever, right? But essentially, it's like you gotta understand there's more to ZvZ than just, you know, the enemy's engaging you and you're engaging back, and there's kills, and you know, you got to put defensives down. No, there's a lot more macro to that. When you understand that and you understand all these different styles, then you're able to counter them effectively. You're able to play even better, right? And by the way, these are all things that, like, the top players in the game, they know these things. They just don't necessarily have names for them and stuff like that, like I do. Like, I'm putting names behind them and stuff, like, just so that we can talk about them, okay? But these are all things that people really do understand, but they're hard concepts to kind of grasp. Let me see here. Okay, teach me how to make some money. Invest 200 mil into Vietnam. Oh my god, y'all are trolling. Y'all are trolling in the chat. BA Strongman Elevate. What is a BA Strongman Elevate? You mixing the two here. You mixing the two. Is that escalation? Is that escalation? Escalation is BA Strongman Elevate, like like the bastard child of both of them. Is that? I'm not shitting on anybody, by the way. I you know, it's just you know, escalation. For those that don't know, the majority of escalation players, like the core and stuff, a lot of them came from Elevate, and a lot of them came from Blue Army after they both disbanded, right, and stuff like that. So essentially, you know, I'm not talking shit. I'm just saying, like, that's what happened. Anyway, all right, we'll keep it moving. If you guys got questions, by the way, I am reading chat, right, obviously. So if you guys got questions at any point in time, questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat. I will listen. I will read. Sometimes I get off track, you know, and I'll read your message a little later, but I try to respond as much as possible. And make sure you guys hit the like, subscribe, follow, all that crap. You know, I don't like repeating it over and over. You guys know what it is. If you guys like the content, you know, it tells me that you enjoy it and that you guys at least are learning something from it, and that way we can, you know, build a bigger community, right? I know some people are putting some comments on the YouTube. I appreciate those comments, man. Show the love. You know, I appreciate it. It keeps me going. You know, it keeps me going because obviously, like, we're a small community right now, right? And I do expect over time we're gonna grow, right? We're gonna grow, and that's the goal, right? Is to grow so much that eventually these concepts and stuff are things that people talk about all the time, and that way we can have better fights in the open world, right? Because that's all everyone of us want. It's good fights, right? In the open world. So that's it. All right. Today's episode is not going to be super long. All right. Here's the thing. I've been trying to cut down the amount of time that we have these episodes. Okay. Initially, it started at about an hour and a half to 2 hour episodes. Okay. That's basically what it was every single time. And if you look back at the older episodes, that's exactly what it was. Now, I started cutting it down to like an hour to hour and a half, but that still was a little long, right? And I know it's long. You know, it's a lot of time out of people's day and stuff. I get it, right? So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to concise the information, just give you guys everything that you guys need, but give it a little bit quicker, right? And so that way we don't take so long doing all kinds of explaining of every little thing, right? And that way you guys get the info you need and then move on with your lives. So I'm trying to get to a point where we're doing about an hour episode or so, right? So that's the future. I don't know how long, you know, we're gonna be, but this episode today is not gonna be super long. It's not because the style is easy, but because there's not a lot of other things to talk about today. Like a couple episodes ago, we've been talking about updates and things like that. You know, the new weapon line that they're releasing, all that stuff. So it just gives us more things to talk about, right? Let's see. Cage Ming Lee is the Albion user known as A-Tree. I know A-Tree. He's a former VA simp, but now is an arch slave. A-Tree was, if I remember correctly, A-Tree used to play DPS and healer, and he would switch off between them. But I remember him a little bit more as DPS. Specifically, I want to say he played Brimstone, right? And he was good. He was good. Let's see. You need this lesson. Keep learning. Everybody needs the lessons, man. Everybody needs the lessons. All right. So. Today we're gonna basically go through the strategy, right? So we're gonna talk about the strategy, the kiting strategy. We're gonna talk about how it works, why it works, that kind of stuff, right? We're also gonna talk about like when is it good to use, because remember, it's not a one size fits all, right? You got to make sure that you're using the right tool for the job. And so, what kind of jobs is kiting good for? Another thing we're going to go into is one of the key factors about kiting is keeping the distance, right? So remember on the last episode of the series, we were talking about tsunami, right? The flood style. And the flood style was all about cutting the distance, right? We talked about that extensively, about how it is that you can cut the distance between you and the enemy so that you can flood them, okay? There were many different tactics that we talked about. Well, today it's actually the complete opposite, because Kite, it does the exact opposite of flood. It actually makes sure that the enemy can never get inside of you, right? So the whole point is to keep the distance with you and the enemy, right? It's like the enemy's got COVID and you just want to keep them at 6 feet away, right? That's the whole point of Kite. All right. Then we're gonna talk about some like skills that you're gonna need, okay, in order to be able to accomplish the Kite style, okay? Because remember, like I said, it is the hardest one to actually do out of all the different styles, at least in my opinion, right? I mean, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, you might have a different opinion, but in my opinion, Kite is the hardest style to actually do consistently well. It's very, very hard. It requires a lot of skill. And so we're going to talk about some of those skills, and those skills specifically have to do with the macro, right? So understanding not just what, where you should be positioned and like that kind of stuff, but you got to understand the flow of the fight. You got to understand, what is happening and what the purpose of the kiting is, right? There's a lot more to it. And then we're going to talk about the brain games, right? We always talk about brain games with this series, right? Because every single calling style is a brain game of itself, right? You're trying to play games on the brain of the enemy in some shape or form. Basically, you're trying to make them make mistakes. That's the whole point of doing every one of these specific styles, is to make the enemy make mistakes. And once the enemy makes mistakes, then you can catch them making that mistake, and that's how you win. Okay, but you're never gonna win if the enemy never makes mistakes. Okay, this is why the top levels ZvZs in the entire game ever, right? Some of the best fights the game has ever seen last 30, 40, 45, 50 minutes, right? And I do mean like 50 minutes of straight back and forth, engage, back up, reposition, engage, back up, like there's a reason. Like there's some people that look at me and they're like wondering why I run 8 gig pots every single day that I go out, right? They're like, why do you run 8 gig pots? And then they also ask me, why do I run 3 omelets, right? Why do I always run 3 omelets when I go out? Well, it's because I fought in fights that have lasted an hour and a half. And they're like, you think we're gonna fight an hour and a half? I was like, yeah, like you can, right? And then if you're not prepared for it, you're screwed, right? That's the point. And so essentially it's all about the brain games, right? And making sure that the enemy makes mistakes, because if they don't make mistakes, you're never gonna beat them. Okay, it doesn't matter what you do, you're never gonna beat them if they don't make mistakes. So with all that, at the very end, we're gonna talk about the long game, right? So basically, what do you do after you've done kiting for whatever amount of time, right? You've kited the enemy around, you've gotten some kills, whatever. What does it look like, right? What does a successfully applied kite style look like? What are the markers, right? When you look at the ZvZ and then you look and it's like, okay, this happened, that means Kite was successful today, right? What are those markers, and then what do you do with that? Okay, so that's how we're gonna end it today. Again, it's not a very long episode. We might actually not even hit an hour today, and I think that's gonna make some people happy, but definitely me. I mean, I'm trying to learn the timing, right? So with the shorter episodes, so I think it'll be good. Unless there's a lot of questions in the chat, then we can go over a little while, but it's all right. So let's get into it. Episode 30, Kite. All right. So the very first thing we're talking about is the strategy. What is Kite, right? What is the kiting strategy? Well, in simplistic terms, I mean, it's just you kite the enemy back, right? I mean, and if you don't know what kite means, it means like you kind of you hit them and then you keep coming back, and you hit them, you keep coming back, right? You don't actually like full engage them. Like you don't commit to a fight. Like if you're watching the video right now, right? If you're watching the video that we're watching right now, you see how like the enemy is kind of inside escalation here. I think it's escalation versus facts, actually, right? So escalation versus facts, and you see how they were kind of inside of each other, right? And now they dispersed. They went away from each other, okay? And neither of them is pushing into each other. Oh, look, facts is pulling east here, right? I think that's facts. It says Bobber. I assume it's facts, right? I think Bobber was facts. I can't remember. Anyway, and so yeah, it is facts. So you see how facts pulled back east, and then escalation went back east to engage them again. This is why I said facts. Dazrun, he likes doing a kite style, but escalation is not actually biting, right? They're not actually following. Okay, they're basically saying, oh, you want to back up? Okay, go ahead, back up. I don't care, right? So that's one of the things they can do. But essentially, look, see, this is why escalation's pushing again. Fax is pulling back, right? The whole point is that Fax is trying to kite, because Fax is very good at kiting. This is what I was talking about. So anyway, that's the point, is that you don't actually commit to a full engagement. You don't just go all the way inside of each other and full engage each other. You actually just kind of hit and go, hit and move, right? So it's what I kind of call the shoot and scoot, right? I mean, I know some people have heard that term, especially if you're from the US. It's shoot and scoot, right? So you basically shoot, and then like you shoot your E, I guess, in the game terms, right? You shoot the E and then you keep on running away, right? That's the whole point. Call it a drive-by or whatever you want to call it, okay, but whatever it works. But essentially, it's just kiting the enemy, making sure that they don't necessarily ever get to pass your front line. And beyond that, it's to make sure that your back line is always clear of enemies. That's the number one most important thing with the strategy, okay? Now, this strategy, unlike the other strategies, so remember, when we were talking about bait and switch, I told you guys that was a caller on caller strategy, okay? What did I mean by that? So it was a strategy that basically one of the callers was trying to bait the other enemy caller to try to engage on them, right? That was the whole point. Now, if you baited the enemy Zerg, it didn't matter, because the Zerg is only going to follow the call from the caller. So you had to bait the caller. So So bait and switch was a caller to caller strategy. Now, Tsunami was actually a zerg to zerg strategy. Why? Because you weren't necessarily trying to like get the enemy caller to do anything. You were just trying to confuse all the individual players in the zerg, in the enemy zerg, right? That was the whole point of the Tsunami of the Flood style, okay? Well, today, the Kite style is actually a caller to zerg strategy, okay? And so what I mean by this is that this is a style in which the caller is actually trying to play on the enemy zerg's cohesion by frustrating them, okay? And if you don't understand what cohesion means, I mean, like in layman terms, cohesion is kind of like what keeps them together, like what keeps them working together, what keeps them basically in the end game listening to calls and you know, not running away, not mounting up, you know, not dropping their E when they're not supposed to, that kind of stuff, right? So cohesion is basically the enemy's ability to continue fighting as an organized force, okay? So this style, kiting style, is actually a caller to zerg strategy in which you want to, your caller is trying to mess up the enemy zerg's cohesion by frustrating them. So what do I mean by this? It's like, well, they feel like they can never catch up to you, okay? And we're going to go into this a little bit more when we talk about brain games later on, right? But essentially, they're going to feel like they can never catch up to you. They can never get a good engage off of you. And in fact, they're going to feel like you're not even actually fighting. Like you're always just, you know, at the edge of their screen and they could just never catch you no matter what they do, right? And it's very, very annoying, very frustrating to deal with zergs that know how to kite very well, okay? So essentially, it's a caller to zerg strategy because your caller is the one making sure that your zerg is backing up and turning around just enough to hit the front a little bit and then keep coming back, right? He's managing the distance between the enemy zerg and your zerg, and that's why it's a caller to zerg strategy. All right. Now, the thing about this strategy is that there's never going to be a real engage. And by that, I mean like a committed engage. You're never actually going to go and like try to hit the enemy back line. You're never going to actually try to get big clumps. Okay. If you can, obviously you should. I'm not saying you shouldn't. Like that would be stupid. Right. But the truth is that you want to make sure that you're always keeping the enemy at a distance. And so what you're doing is you're only ever turning around to hit the first couple guys you see, and then you get on out, right? You don't just stay there. You know, you engage and then you hold and you go and loot him, or you hold the position or whatever, or you even try to push at them or whatever. You never do that. It's the opposite. You hit them just a little bit, literally the first two guys you see, you hit them and you keep backing up, right? That's the whole point of this style. Now, there are uses for this style, okay? I know a lot of you guys are like, well, how am I supposed to get kills if I'm only hitting the first two guys? Well, I'm going to explain that in a little bit, but essentially, the point of this style is that it's a very slow style. Remember I said it earlier, this is actually gives a really, how do I say this? It makes it a lot easier for players who are less experienced in ZvZ to play inside of a kite style because of the fact that they're able to slow the fight down, right? There's not, that whole 30-second engage thing, it doesn't actually happen, right? Like kiting, like you'll get an engage on average every 45 to 50 seconds. Okay, like seriously. And when you engage, you're literally only engaging 2-3 people max at the very front. And then you keep moving, right? So the whole point is that it's very slow. You're not going to get that one big clump and dump that we've been seeing in ZvZ's recent. And this is also another thing that you have to kind of think about, is that this style is not being used much at all in Albion other than Fax, right? When I look at all the zergs that are using it, nobody's using it except for Fax. Now, with that being said, Fax doesn't just do kite. They do kite a little bit and then they commit, right? But I think, and personally, if I had to give any direct advice to Dazrun, is that he needs to commit much, much later. He commits too soon, right? He does the kite very well, and his Zerg does it really well. The problem is that he commits too soon, and he needs to give it more time. He needs to be more patient, right? So if anybody knows Dazrun, let him know, man. I think that any caller that can do kite really well has a good potential in front of him, right? But he needs to just slow it down. That's all he needs to do, right? So the uses for this Kite style, like what actual kind of fights would be good for, right? Obviously, it's the number one best option against multiple enemy fronts, okay? Now, I'm not talking about, you know, enemy fronts that, like, let's say you have 100 in your Zerg and the enemy has 100 as well, and they split 50 and 50 on each side. No, I mean, you don't want to kite that. You kite one side, but you're basically flooding the fuck out of the other, right? Like they're giving you a 100 v 50 on one side. Like, you take that shit. That's easy. That's not a, you know, that's like calling 101, okay? What I'm talking about is actually, you know, if the enemy has 100, like you have 100 and the enemy has 100 on your east and 100 on your north, right? You got to kite them motherfuckers around. Like, you cannot take 200 people against your 100 straight up and hold chokes, and, you know, you can't do that. You have to kite them back, and you have to kill just their front line little by little, and you keep chipping at them, and you keep backing up, and you keep backing up, right? Because if you overstay, if you overcommit, their 200 man is just gonna flood you and you're gonna be dead, right? And this has happened many times before. I know that you guys have experienced it on the field, and this is the only thing that you can do is literally kite, okay? You kite them back forever until their numbers thin enough where you can actually take the fight, okay? Now, in other scenarios, what is kiting good for? Well, kiting is amazing for any caller that is running essentially any other style, okay? But specifically, it's great against the Tsunami style, right? So we talked about the Tsunami style 2 weeks ago, and that was basically the Flood style, which is right now the dominating style from callers in the game right now, okay? Where everybody like just tries to run into the enemy and flood them. Now, I will mention one thing. Since this season started, this has been changing, and you don't see Tsunami as much anymore, not at the highest levels. However, you're still seeing it a lot in the lower tier Zergs, okay? This is because the lower tier Zergs take much longer to adapt. But if you look, like, just look at the fight we're watching right now, right? This is a Oculto. I think he's with Escalation as well. He's fighting against Crab's Horde, it looks like. So essentially, Escalation is no longer just full-blown doing a complete flood style like they used to like 2 months ago, okay? They're actually completely adapting to a much more kite style, which is great. I think it's great because it used to be better to do the flood style because you had stalker jackets and Demon Fang was really strong, especially in close quarters, and you had great mobility with those Demon Fangs, that kind of stuff, right? But now you're not having that as much in the game because of the changes with SBI, and also people are now checking out different weapons, doing different styles, doing different things. I know a lot of people are playing around with the Clarent Blade and that kind of stuff. Right now, Clarent Blade has a longer range, but you gotta stack it. Anyway, my point is that, look, right now, look at the video. See, Escalation's completely backing out, right? They're completely going south right now. It's weaving around in between rocks, you know, and they turn around, they kind of kite them back. Look at how the enemy's kind of like one screen away to the north. They're using occult staffs to speed their Zerg up and to have better mobility. This is Kite, right? This is Kite. And the thing is that I said this months ago. I said the best strategy that anybody can have against a flood style is Kite style, right? And that's because the flood requires you to be able to go inside the enemy. And if you don't go inside the enemy, or if you can't go inside the enemy because the enemy won't allow you to walk inside of them because they just keep running away, right? So if you cannot do that as a Tsunami style, as a flood style, then you completely lose the fight. Like, there's nothing you can do. If that is your number one thing to do in a ZvZ, and you're fighting against someone that does Kite style, you're absolutely wrecked. Like, you lose, just straight up. It's like, again, it's like rock, paper, scissors, and you chose rock and they chose paper, right? Like, there's nothing you can do about it, okay? That's the point. And so because of that, everything is changing, and now Kite style is becoming more prevalent, okay? Again, it's not all over the place yet, but you're seeing it here and there a little bit, and it's starting up. Fax was the first one to kick it off, but now other Zergs are starting to adopt it. But again, it's not all over the game, not yet, okay? Like Sex and Flex is not using it, like not using it at all, right? So there's a lot of big guilds that are simply not using it at all. So now it's also good basically against everything else, because it's like, think about it. If you do like bait and switch, right? What the hell are you going to bait if the enemies just keep constantly kiting, right? You can't bait anything. Now, the other ones I'm going to, I'll talk about, in the coming weeks, like crescent pressure and but the thing is that, again, those have to deal with trying to cut the distance. And so kiting also counters that. This is why personally I think kiting is the best, because it works effectively against every single style. The problem is that it's really hard to do. Now, the one use that it doesn't have, that is not a good use for with Kite, right? Kite absolutely sucks in castles or territories. So anything that has like a stationary objective, Kite just doesn't work. Okay, because you literally need to be kiting around the map. Like, even if you think about it, like if you're hitting a hideout or hitting whatever, right, a hideout, or you want to protect the hideout, then you're kiting the enemy back. Then guess what? While you're kiting back, the enemy can go and send a few hammers to the hideout while you just keep kiting, and they're gonna bang the hideout out while you're kiting, right? Because kiting is very slow. Remember, you're not gonna get these big hits. You're not going to kill the enemy in one hit. You're not going to have a massive clump and deletion. It's not going to happen, not until the very end, okay? But it's not going to happen while you're kiting. And so because of that, it's a very, very slow bleed of the entire ZvZ, and it takes a long time. And that's not very good for you can't kite around a castle, you can't kite around a territory, and you can't necessarily kite away from the hideout that you're trying to protect, right? So in those aspects, kite is not good, right? Kite is only good when you can use space, distance, that kind of stuff. All right. Now, in that sense, we talked a lot about distance, obviously, because it's all about keeping the distance, right? And I mentioned that earlier. Now, when it comes to keeping the distance, okay, there are a few things that we have to pay attention to as to how we can actually accomplish keeping the distance, okay? If we don't do these things, then we won't be able to keep the distance, and Kite is not going to work, okay? So number one, okay, it's going to be, you need to have high mobility peeling, okay? What do I mean by this? I mean that you need to have supports and tanks that are able to move around quickly. They have high mobility, but they're also able to peel back the enemy, okay? What do I mean by this? Okay, I'll put it this way. Heavy mace. I love heavy mace. You guys know that, right? I love heavy mace. It's my favorite weapon in the game right now. But heavy mace is just not a high mobility peeling, right? It's not very high mobility, and you're like, oh, but it is. You have the snare charge. Yeah. But if you use the snare charge to snare charge the enemy, then suddenly you cut the distance with them, and now you're inside of them while your Zerg is kiting back, right? So then you're inside of them, and what are you going to be like? Oh, well, I'm going to use my sprint to run away. Yeah, but what if they perch you? What if they stun you when you go in? Whatever, right? No matter what, you got yourself inside the enemy, and that now forces you to be stuck in there, okay? So heavy mace sucks at Kite, right? Like, and here's the thing, right? This is why I told you guys a few weeks ago. I don't remember exactly when I said it. I said it in one of the episodes. I told you guys a few weeks ago, heavy mace is going to start to go away. Now, I don't think it's going to go away completely, okay? Because heavy mace is just very powerful, but it's going to go away significantly. And the reason is that right now, a lot of people are running 2, even 3 heavy maces per party sometimes, right? That's not going to happen anymore, okay? You only really need 1 heavy mace per party, and that's at most. If anything, you can probably run a full Kite Zerg with 1 heavy mace every 2 parties, and you'll be totally fine. The reason is because heavy mace is really good when you're actually inside the enemy and holding the line and that kind of stuff, right? But if you're kiting back, heavy mace is absolutely useless. Like, there's no reason to use heavy mace in that scenario, okay? So high mobility peeling, what kind of weapons are these, right? What does high mobility peeling look like? Well, that's Icicle, right? That's an easy one. I think everybody understands why, right? I mean, Icicle, you have the W that frost blink, so you can actually walk into the enemy, and then you root the guys inside of you, and then you also blink out, right? So it's beautiful. It's a great W. And then on top of that, you also have your Icicle E, which is actually ranged, and it has like an 8-meter radius, I think, 9? 8? I think it's 8. It has like 8-meter radius. It's huge. It's 50% slow, which is awesome, and it's ranged. I think it's like 12 meters distance, plus the 8-meter radius, right? So it's like, essentially, you're looking at a 12 plus 8, you're looking at 20-meter radius. Well, 20-meter distance, I should say, 20-meter distance. So that's amazing, right? Like that's like a Mist Piercer or something, right? So essentially, the icicle is great because it has great mobility and it has great, slows and stuff like that. Which brings me to another point. High mobility peeling is actually soft CC. It's not hard CC. You don't really want hard CC. You don't want to be able to directly stop the enemy, right? You just want to slow them down. And why? Because you can say, oh, well, I want to actually stop them. Stopping them is better, isn't it? And it's like, well, not always. Because what you want to do is that you want to stagger the enemy, okay? You want to make some enemies move slower than others. Now, I don't mean just slow them. I mean, that's too simple, right? But what if you stop, like you snare charge or root, I should say, right? A couple of them and not all of them. And then some of them get a cleanse through it and some don't, right? That kind of stuff. Okay. So you do that, then you're going to stagger them. Some of them are going to go farther forward than the rest of them behind. Okay. That's the point. So this is why icicle is so important. Now, I mentioned snare charge, but again, snare charge is not good because you have to actually jump in there and get yourself in that position, and you don't have a lot of other mobility to deal with heavy mace other than your boots, okay? But what about a Grail Seeker? Grail Seeker is amazing for Kite, man. This is why Grail Seeker became very powerful. This is why it became meta, right? For a long time. It's because Kite was the number one thing to play when Grail Seeker was at its height. Now, why is Grail Seeker not as big anymore? Well, it's not because Heavy Mace is better, but because Heavy Mace is better suited to that tsunami style that we've been seeing a lot of lately, okay? Now, on the other hand, right, Grail Seeker is probably going to make a comeback. Just like I said, Heavy Mace is probably going to go away a little bit, okay? Grail Seeker is going to make a comeback, okay? Because people are starting to move towards the Kite direction. And that, I think, is a good thing, right? It's going to make for better fights, better macro level fights. But yeah, so Grail Seeker is going to be necessary because Grail Seeker, you can use your E-root, which is going to be great. It has a great distance, great range, right? But on top of that, okay, you also have mobility if you run the stun run on W, which, by the way, I know a lot of people like running Rising Blow on the W for Grail Seekers, and I get it for like fighting against like a Tsunami style Zerg, but it doesn't make sense in Kite. In Kite, you need to run stun run. Okay, if you're a Grail Seeker and you're playing Kite, you have to run stun run because the stun run gives you like 30% move speed. I think it's 30%, maybe 40. Anyway, it gives you a move speed, and that is actually critical. On top of that, you also have the cartwheel, which the cartwheel in and of itself is a little bit of a move speed, but it also gives you an actual move speed, like 20 or 30% increase. I can't remember the exact number, but essentially the cartwheel also helps you get out and away from the enemy. Okay, so Grail Seeker has great mobility. And it's a root, right? So you're going to root the enemy, but you don't want to root everybody. I mean, if you can, sure, go ahead and take it. But essentially, some people, even if you root everybody, some people are going to get cleansed. Some people won't. And that, in and of itself, is going to be a stagger, right? You're going to stagger the enemy. And then you're going to be fast enough to get away from that. So that's going to be great. So again, we're looking at Icicles and we're looking at Grail Seekers, right? Those are the two obvious ones, okay? Those are the two obvious ones. However, there's a lot other ones that we can look at that are going to be very important components to the entire peeling process, okay? Because you can't just run a bunch of Icicles and Grail Seekers. I mean, I'm sure you can, but I think the enemy is going to be able to like just see through you, and they're going to know, okay, the Grail Seekers coming in, get ready with the cleanse, that kind of shit, right? So anyway, the other ones that you can run are like Growth Keepers, right? Growth Keepers are very important for peeling. And the reason is because of the ring, right? If you run the W ring on the Growth Keeper, it helps a lot with the peeling. The W ring actually lasts a good amount of time. So the Growth Keeper can actually just drop it and then keep on moving, right? And the Growth Keeper, by the time the enemy Zerg walks into that ring, that Growth Keeper is going to be like half a map away, right? Like half a screen away, okay? And so what I'm saying is that Growth Keeper rings are going to help a lot with staggering the enemy again, right? Another one that is also going to be very important, and this is not necessarily going to help stagger the enemy, but it's actually going to help make sure that your tanks survive, because that's a critical component. If you haven't noticed by now, this entire here, let me drink some water. Give me a second. Gotta stay hydrated. All right. So if you haven't noticed by now, the entire basis of Kite revolves around one thing, and that's tanks, okay? see how I haven't mentioned anything about DPS and engages and anything like that, because all of that is secondary to the style. Obviously, you need good DPS. Obviously, you need certain things. But in general, if the tanks don't survive or if the tanks don't do their job, then this kiting style won't work. It's just that simple. Now, with that being said, you're gonna need to be able to help these tanks out. So how can you help these tanks out? Well, obviously you're thinking healers and that kind of stuff, and that's great. You know, if you want to think healers, then you want to have maybe a couple blights in the Zerg that their only job, their only role is to heal the kite tanks, right? That is a beautiful use for blight. And you guys know I'm not a great fan of blight, but that is blight at its finest, right? Or in general, running some natures with breeze, right? Breeze that actually, like, they're putting it off exactly where like those kiting tanks are. That's gonna be great, you know, moving and healing, right? Because you don't really want a healer, a holy healer, to turn around and drop a holy Q and like stand there and fucking drop a channel, right? Because then they're gonna fall behind. And again, it's all about keeping moving, right? And so the breeze, you can do all that while you're moving. The other nature staffs, right? There's some that you can just drop them without channeling. So that's the point. Now, on top of that, though, other than heals, right? What is also very important is that you're gonna need to have a lot of arcanes on the W cleanse. Okay. Now, I know some people like to run arcanes on like the mimic W, or they like to run you know, the beams. Sometimes people like being beamers and stuff like that. Don't do it. So for kiting, you're gonna need to have literally every single one of your arcanes on nothing but arcane cleanse. And the reason for it is because arcane cleanse gives a speed boost. Okay, that speed boost, on top of it being a cleanse, is gonna be critical to ensuring that your kite tanks are able to survive. Because like a Grail Seeker is gonna go in a little bit, stagger behind your Zerg while you're kiting back, and what's gonna happen? Inevitably, one of those Grail Seekers is gonna get caught. Inevitably, one of those Icicles is gonna get caught, right? You're not playing against fucking NPCs here, right? You're playing against players who are purposely trying to make sure that they stop those tanks of yours. And so they're gonna need help. And that is beautiful for arcanes, because arcanes can do the cleanse at a distance, which is great, right? Now, granted, you can say, oh, well, the cleanse from the you can do the cleanse heal from the nature. Yeah, that's fine too, but that's just the cleanse. I'm talking about the cleanse plus a speed boost. That's what's really gonna make them survive. It's that extra speed boost on those kiting tanks. So basically, you're gonna have a bunch of arcanes that are constantly looking behind to make sure that every single one of those tanks that goes in gets out. Every single time they drop anything, they get out with that speed boost plus the cleanse. Okay, very, very, very important. But there's another piece, another component that actually becomes extremely important to this entire style. And I'll tell you guys the truth, without this one component, the kiting style becomes very dangerous. Okay, I'm not gonna say that without this component, the kiting style cannot be done. Of course not. It can 100% be done. However, there's a very clear counter to it, and if you don't have this in your Zerg while you're kiting, and the enemy does this counter, you're screwed. Okay, and that one critical component is firewall. Okay, now a lot of people might be like, wait, what? Firewall? Like I know firewall is important, but why is it this important? Okay, for kiting style, firewall is incredibly important, because if the enemy cannot catch up to you, okay, you're constantly kiting them back and you're doing a great job, your tanks are staying alive and your tanks are kiting them back and your Zerg is moving quickly, okay, the enemy's never able to actually catch you. So what your enemy's gonna do at some point, if this is gonna happen, no matter what, I promise you, like I think even the worst of Zergs will do this at some point. Okay, they're gonna mount up and they're gonna run around behind you and they're gonna dismount inside of you. Okay, now I'm not saying their entire Zerg is gonna do this, no, because then you could just one-shot them as they're running in mounted like a Dothraki charge, right? However, they're gonna do it, and it's gonna be a few of them, and it's gonna be tanks most likely. So you're gonna have like 5-6 tanks that are just running right up at you, and they're gonna dismount right behind you. And guess what? Those guys, as soon as they get cooldowns, they're gonna snare charge you, they're gonna stun you, they're gonna root you, they're gonna slow you, they're gonna knock you back into their own Zerg, right? They're gonna basically stop you from being able to keep walking. Okay, You cannot allow that, because if that happens, I don't care how much you kited, how much your tanks were kiting, it doesn't matter, you're screwed. And the number one answer to all of this is firewall, because there's nothing else in your back line that is gonna be able to actually kite back those guys that dismounted inside of you. Okay, there's nothing else. Okay, so you're gonna need that firewall. Now, what you can do is you can stop their QW auto attack, which is gonna be very important. Okay, and we're gonna talk a little bit about that later on. But essentially, yeah, you're gonna need to stop QW auto attack. But remember, you cannot do too much QW auto attack. And the reason is because every time you drop a Q, you're gonna stand there for a few seconds, right? Every time you drop a W, you're gonna stand there for a few seconds. You drop an auto attack, your character is gonna stop walking, it's gonna turn around, drop an auto attack, have a stand time, and then keep walking, right? So all these things are basically you not moving. So if the enemy dismounts inside of you and you use QW and auto attack to deal with them, guess what? They did their job. They don't even have to do a single stun, root, or slow or anything on you. You already stopped yourself from moving. That was their entire goal. All they have to do now is just survive. They pop a gig pot and they're alive, right? So the point is that you cannot stop moving, right? And so you have to be able to peel these tanks back. So how do you basically make sure that these guys that are dismounting inside of you, and then they're walking right next to you, how do you make sure that these guys can't follow you and they actually stagger back behind, you know, into where your tanks are now staggering, and then your tanks can stagger them? So how do you get them out of your back line and into your tank's stagger line, right? How do you do that? Well, remember, you're keeping moving, right? So if you're still moving, let's say you're the enemy dismounted inside of you and you're moving east, right? Okay, keep moving east, that's fine. And then drop a firewall right in front of him, right? And so he's gonna have to go either around that firewall, or he's gonna have to pop a night helm, and then someone else's firewall after his night helm ends is gonna do the exact same job, okay? So you keep walking east, and as you're walking east, you drop that firewall. So what he's gonna have to do is he's gonna have to go around that firewall, or wait until it's done, right? And so that's gonna give you distance between you and him. And believe me, it's a massive amount of distance, especially if you place that firewall well. So positioning a firewall is gonna be very important. But after that firewall ends, guess what? Now they are more in line with your stagger tanks, and then your stagger tanks can continue staggering those tanks until those tanks are now at the distance you want them at, right? So the whole point is that without firewall, you can't really do this, because you're not going to have many tanks that are going to be inside of your zerg waiting for this to happen. Okay, your tanks are too busy peeling the entire rest of the zerg. All right, so this is going to be a very important component. Now, if you can do it with other things other than like firewalls, I mean, by all means, but there's not a lot else in the game that you can do it with. I know Robo Purity could help, right? Because it can knock back. But the problem with Robo Purity is that you have to walk up to the enemy to be able to knock him back. And if that means you have to turn around and walk towards the enemy again, that goes against the entire Kite mode, right? That goes against the entire point of doing Kite. So again, very, very important that you have high mobility peeling, but you're able to support that high mobility peeling, okay? And you need to have other avenues to be able to counter the enemy who is trying to counter you, right? So this is where firewalls come in, okay? This is where the arcane cleanses come in, that kind of stuff. Very, very important, okay? Another one I could mention here is the Beetle, right? The Beetle W, it speed boosts for everybody in the Zerg, right? So everybody walking in, it's like 30-40%, which is great, right? So if you have Beetles in your Zerg, that's great for kiting as well, because you can use that speed boost, that W speed boost, right? So now, when it comes to the DPS, right? We talked a lot about everything else. Let's talk about the DPS. Obviously, you're going to need firewalls. I already mentioned that. So you need some fires. And what kind of fire are you going to run? You can run Brimstone. You can run Dawnsong. Okay, both of them, in my opinion, are very, very good, very powerful. I think a lot of people are sleeping on Dawnsong. Personally, I believe that the anti-heal mechanics in this game are very, very, very strong, but people just don't take advantage of them. So anyway, but yeah, Brimstone or Dawnsong, because you need to run firewall. You just need to have it. Okay, so and if you don't want to run those, then I don't know, run some other fire that you think might be good. I don't know. I don't know which one could be good, but you know, great fire, I guess. I don't know, but that's the point, right? You gotta run a fire. Now, on top of that, you also need to run other ranged DPS. And the reason you want ranged is because if you're running melee needs to cut the distance with the enemy so that you can hit them. You cannot hit the enemy at a distance and then keep them at a distance, right? You can't do that. So with melee, you literally have to come up to their face and then hit them and then run away from them. No, man, you already walk towards them. That right there on its own, you cut the distance with the enemy. You already screwed up your own style, which was Kite style, right? So in order to stay true to Kite style, you have to stay with ranged DPS, and that's going to be things like longbow, siege bow, permafrost. Now, another one that you can throw in here is weeping repeater, right? Because you're kiting back, and so the enemy can walk themselves into those weeping repeaters. The problem is that weeping repeater is not going to be for the actual engage. It's going to be more for like staggering, right? But you're staggering with damage as opposed to staggering with with CC. I'm not saying it's a replacement. You have to have CC stagger. No, this is not a replacement. But I'm saying weeping staggering could actually be a very viable option to make sure that the enemies are not just walking straight towards you, right? It'll help. Is what I'm saying. Other than that, I mean, siege bow. The problem with siege bow is that it's channeled, so you basically only want to get like 3 channels off. If you're really risky, you'll get that 4th shot off, but really you just want to get 3 shots off and move on with your life, right? You don't want to do the entire channel because then your standing time too long. Okay. Now, the next part about keeping the distance is going to be you want to do hit and runs, right? And I already explained a little bit about this, so I won't spend too much more time. But essentially, you want to turn around, you hit the first two or three guys you see, and then you keep on moving. Okay. The whole point is to hit the first few guys that are right in front of you and keep the distance going. Now, if you don't kill them, that's fine. It doesn't matter. You don't have to get kills. Eventually, you have to get kills, right? But getting 1 kill at a time is more than enough to make this strategy a viable strategy. Why? Because this strategy is playing on time, right? It's all about the longer it takes the ZvZ going, the more times you can turn around and kill 1 guy, right? And if you're staying at a distance, then guess what? They're not countering and hitting you because they're not going to kill anybody, right? They're not going to kill anybody because you're at a distance. That's the whole point of Kite, right? So if you turn around, you hit and kill 1 guy, and then they try to hit you and they don't kill anybody, then guess what? You're at a net positive. That's the whole point. So now you understand why it's going to take so long for Kite to actually win a ZvZ. Is because you're kiting and you're turning around and you're literally only killing 1 or 2 guys every single engage, right? That's very, very, very slow. Okay, but I'm telling you, it works. It works. It's worked many times before. It definitely works now. Now this is kind of more of a tip to try to like give you guys an ability to like understand how to keep the distance a little bit more, other than tanks, right? When you're going to drop your engage, especially the DPS, right? When you're going to drop your engage, instead of sprinting towards the enemy to drop your E, try just walking a little bit towards the enemy, because remember, the enemy's already walking towards you. So if you turn around and walk towards them, you're already cutting distance with them very quickly because they're running towards you. So that means that if you just turn around, drop your E, and then sprint away from them, that's going to give you the ability to make sure that you're always keeping distance with the enemy, right? Because you're cutting distance with them because they're cutting distance with you. They're running towards you. And then you turn around, run towards them a little bit. That's going to give you a lot of distance coverage. And then you sprint away and you regain your distance with the enemy. That's I think the best way to do it. But obviously you can't do it every time. It's really hard. You have to have basically impeccable positioning, right, to be able to do it. But it's something to practice, right? Try to practice, if you're playing Kite with your Zerg, try to practice just turning around and dropping your E without your sprint and then sprinting away, right? That is much, much better for Kite than to sprint in and hit the enemy, okay? Now, if you have a quick E channel and like a long sprint, like let's say you're running Royal Sandals, that's like 8-second sprint, right? And your E is not very long, so you can sprint towards the enemy, drop it, and then sprint away, then that's fine too. Okay, as long as you have the sprint to run away, that's the important part. All right, now we're gonna talk about some macro skills. Okay, some macro skills. So some of the skills that you're going to need in terms of macro to understand how to keep the positioning, how to keep the distance. Okay. And that's the number one thing is the positioning, right? You always want to stay on the move. I already mentioned that. Don't use too much QW or auto attack, right? Because again, those things make you stop. Now, it doesn't mean don't use them. It means make sure that you get distance. And then when you have a little bit of enough distance, if you know you have enough distance, turn around, drop a Q or a W, and then keep moving, right? Don't just not do Qs, Ws, auto attacks. That's terrible. But what I'm saying is that you need to make sure that your positioning between you and the enemy is always at a safe distance. And if you have plenty of distance, then you can turn around and do QW. If you don't have plenty of distance, do not bother with QW auto attack, right? So always stay on the move. That's the number one most important thing. But when you're staying on the move, remember to always stay together, okay? You need to always be close enough with the rest of your Zerg to be able to hit the enemy. Because if you're not able to turn around and hit the enemy, then guess what? You're kiting, you're gonna kite forever, and you're not getting that 1 or 2 kills every turn, then guess what? You're never gonna win. Like, the fight's never gonna end. Like, it's just that simple, right? So you actually do have to get at least 1 or 2 kills in every engage. And so if you do that, as long as you stay a little bit close to your Zerg, just enough to get 1 or 2 kills every turn, you're gonna be perfectly fine. Again, positioning is very, very important, but positioning in terms of staying away from the enemy, but actually close enough to be able to turn and hit them. Okay, that's it's tough, right? This is why kiting it requires high-level players to be able to accomplish it properly. Okay, now the next thing you guys got to understand about this style with kite, okay, is that you have to think, right? You will die if your tanks cannot get out. Okay, so if you're wondering, like, oh, where'd all my tanks go? Then guess what? They're dead, right? Just like you were killing 1 or 2 of them every single turn, they were killing 2 or 3 of your tanks every single turn, right? And so now at some point, because you kept leaving your tanks and your peelers behind, they end up dying, right? And you're like, yeah, but we're fine. We still have, 32%. We have a good Zerg. It's like, yeah, but you have no tanks. You're dead. You without the tanks, you can't peel, and without peeling, the kite strategy doesn't even work. So you lost the fight, right? Very important. I already talked about that a lot. I just want to mention it again because it's critical, right? It's absolutely critical. If you lose your tanks, it's over, right? Now the next one is going to be thinning their front, right? So just like they might want to be chipping away at your tanks, remember, your goal is to chip away at their tanks, right? One by one. And so when you're little by little killing their tanks one by one, okay, eventually they're going to have very few tanks, okay? And when they have very few tanks, that's when you want to switch gears and you no longer want to keep backing off, right? You now want to start looking at actually full-blown engaging them, right? That's basically when kiting ends. And then you start playing more aggressive, okay? So remember, kiting is very defensive. So you stop being defensive, you start getting offensive when the enemy has very few tanks left. Why? Because if the enemy has few tanks left, you can dive their back line and they can't do anything about it. They can't stop you. It's basically all clothy back line or leather back line. It's simple kills, easy kills, right? And so what you'll see very, very often in these ZvZs of like 2 really high level Zergs that play kite, what you'll see very often is that the fight is going to last 30-40 minutes, right? I already mentioned that. But then what's going to happen is those 30-40 minutes, you're going to have nothing but like 1 or 2 kills here and there, right? And that's it the entire time. And then suddenly in the last minute, 2 minutes at most, right? You're going to have like fucking non-stop highlight reels. Okay, like literally the feed is just gonna keep going and going and going and going, right? Why? Because the tanks on one side completely fell apart. They no longer had enough tanks and the other side decided to crash into them and they couldn't do anything about it. So that's the whole point, right? That's the point of kite, okay? And we'll get into that a little bit more in a second. Now, let's get into brain games real quick here. So the brain games that you're playing on the enemy, all right, is basically you want to get them really frustrated. I mean, think about it. It's very, very frustrating to try to go and be like, yeah, I'm gonna catch up to the enemy, and then I'm gonna clump them, and I'm gonna dump them, and I'm gonna kill them, and I'm gonna win, right? And it's like, all right, I'm walking towards the enemy, and then it's like, oh, I got slowed, but I'm okay. I'm gonna keep walking, and then it's like, yeah, I see them right there on the edge of my screen. And then it's like, I'm catching up to them. I'm going to pop a sprint. And then, my sprint got purged, right? Like Dust Weaver armor or something, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, I'm still walking towards them. And it's like, you literally are doing that and you can never catch them for 15, 20, 25 minutes, right? You cannot catch them at all, right? You can't get a single kill. You see one tank and your caller's like, you know what, guys? Kill that one tank. Yeah, delete that icicle. You know, 3, 2, 1, delete the icicle, and the fucking icicle blinks away, right? It's like, god damn, like there's nothing you can do to be able to catch the enemy, to get any kills, to do nothing. Like right now, the video we're watching is actually like they're kiting back, like Smurfing Monkeys here on the east side is like kiting back, right? And it's like, see how they're not really able to catch them? Look at that. They try to get an air compress, nothing happened, right? Now they're getting turned on, right? And it's like, look, they're trying to kill these couple tanks. So now they're frustrated. They're trying to kill that one tank, and they all turn around for that one tank and create even more distance between them and Smurfing Monkeys on the northeast, right? I'm not saying that was a bad call. I mean, remember, the enemy here, Smurfy Monkeys, has to save their tanks, right? So this was a good call by Rapids here. Rapids is calling here. This is Chips. So this was a good call by Rapids. But what I'm saying is that this is exactly what Kite is, right? And like I said, people do it. They just don't do it a lot, and they don't do it well, right? Because right here, they let their tank die. And now they're starting to get a little bit flooded. They're starting to catch up, right? So that's the whole point. But you see, imagine if Smurfing Monkeys here kept kiting and they did it well, right? And then Chips here is never able to catch them. Like right now, they got a nice clump and dump, right? What if that can't happen? What if they never get clumped and dumped, right? Then that is going to be incredibly frustrating, and it's going to cause the enemies to lose their cohesion. Remember, I explained to you guys that about cohesion, right? They're going to start basically playing on their own timers. So an individual is going to be like, oh, I'm falling behind. I'm going to pop my sprint. Well, guess what? Now that individual no longer has his sprint at the same time when the caller says sprint forward, right? Now, another individual is going to do that at a different timer, and everybody's going to have different sprint timers. And if everybody has different sprint timers, nobody can engage, because you can't engage at the same time if you don't have sprint timers at the same time, right? So that's one thing. Another issue is going to be that some people are going to get so angry, they're going to basically mount up and try to run to your backline. Remember, I mentioned this earlier. This is why you need firewalls. But let's say they do, right? They say they mount up and they go to your backline, and they dismount. They're like, yeah, I'm in their backline. And then suddenly they're stuck with a fucking firewall, and then they get CC chained and slowed and all that crap. And then they end up falling behind again, right? That's incredibly frustrating. So you know what they're going to start doing? They're going to start throwing their E's out of random, right? Also, callers are going to get frustrated. They're going to be like, oh, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to chase anymore. I'm tired of chasing. They're going to start calling full engages on 1 or 2 guys, right? And if your caller is good, they're going to see that. And the next time that the enemy does that, your caller is going to be like, okay, we're going to full pounce on that, right? Because that's basically a bait and switch. So you see how strategies change. Remember, I've told you that the best callers change strategies at the moment, right? So that's how a good component. And again, if you guys think that that's kind of like a little too much, I promise you guys could look back at some of the fights from, season 10, season 11, 12, 13. Like there are plenty of fights like this, man. I promise you, because those were the times that Kite was really big. So that's another one, right? With they're basically going to get frustrated. They're going to try to Dothraki charge you, right? Now, another thing that's going to cause their frustration and their loss of cohesion is the fact that they feel as though you're not committing to the fight, right? Everybody wants to like dismount, and it's like, yeah, we're excited. Yeah, I'm gonna overcharge and I'm gonna fight and it's gonna be fun. Yeah, I'm gonna have fun, right? And then it's like, it's not fun just trying to catch the enemy who just keeps running away. Like, that's so boring. That is so annoying, right? It's like, dude, like, what are you doing? Like, come fight, like everybody's typing in local. All you do is run, like all these things, right? But the thing is like they get frustrated. That's why they're typing in chat, right? They're not typing in chat because they think they're better than you. They're typing in chat because they're frustrated with you, right? And that means that your kiting strategy is actually working, right? So the moment you see them kiting it or typing in chat, that means that these guys are literally so frustrated that they don't know what to do other than just try to talk shit, right? Like, that means the kite strategy is working really, really well, right? And that is very important, their frustration, because again, they're going to start dropping E's randomly. They're going to start sprinting on their own. They're going to stop listening to the caller because they're going to think, oh, you know what? We can't catch these guys, and my caller's calls are not fixing it. So why should I listen to my caller who can't deal with the enemy kiting us, right? It's valid. It's valid, right? So the point is that people are going to stop listening to calls. They're going to start doing whatever the hell they want. And when you actually go to try to fight them, guess what? They're not going to be able to fight you because they're all off cooldowns and stuff like that, right? So this is why Kite is so powerful, because it builds on the enemy's frustration. Okay. Now, the thing about this is another brain game, right? And this one is a lot more subtle. The ones I just told you guys are very like, you know, surface level, right? But this one's very subtle. This one's like very, very like under the table type shit. Okay. This is a very slow bleed. Remember, I explained that many times. There's a reason, right? The reason is that this is a very, very slow bleed. You're slowly cutting down the enemy one guy at a time, right? One tank at a time, one support at a time, whatever's in the front line, you're cutting them down one by one, okay? And that's very important. Why? Because when the enemy sees a clump and dump go to their face, they're gonna be like, oh my God, we lost so many, right? You guys have all heard it. When one of your bomb squads in your Zerg yells all of a sudden like, oh, we got 30 kills, dude. It's like, listen, there's no way a bomb squad got 30 kills, right? There's no way a bomb squad got 30 kills. So the truth is that they probably got like 10, maybe 12, 13 kills at most. And that's a lot, right? 13 kills, right? But they're going to get excited. They're like, oh, we got 30 kills. Okay, great. That's fine, right? But the opposite's going to happen. If you actually only kill one or two guys of the enemy is going to think, oh, we didn't lose anything. And then you kill another one or two guys, oh, we didn't lose anything. You kill another one or two guys, oh, we didn't lose anything. And by the end of this, after 10, 15, 20 minutes, what's going to happen is you actually have like 50 kills on the board, right? And the enemy's still thinking that they have a full Zerg, right? Because they don't realize, now I'm talking about like the largest scale ZvZ, but you know, you can, you know, change the numbers to whatever, you know, whatever suits your guild, but it's all the same, right? So the enemy Zerg is going to be thinking, yeah, I mean, you know, we haven't really taken that much losses, right? Yeah, we've probably, we've lost maybe like 10 or 15 people when they've actually lost 50, right? And you might say, oh, no. Like there's, you can tell when you've lost 50. Not in Kite, because remember, Kite staggers the enemy. So the enemy is never together. So it's really hard for them to gauge how many people they have, right? And so what's going to happen is they're not going to realize how many people they've actually lost because you're killing them all one by one. And that means that sometimes they might actually play too aggressive and expose themselves because they think they have a full Zerg when they actually don't. They're actually very weak and they don't even realize it themselves, right? And by the way, this is not something that's like, oh, well, good callers will know. No. Like, this is really, really high level shit. Like, it's really hard to be able to actually tell what your Zerg is looks like when you're constantly being kited. It's really, really hard. I'm telling you guys, like the best callers in the game have struggled with this sometimes, right? This is why you know, back in Blue Army, we used to count deaths and shit in the middle of a ZvZ, right? Sometimes we would have, you know, counts of how many people have died and shit like that. We would count them on our heads and stuff, right? Because it was very important that we counted every single death, okay? Because it was that hard to assess the strength of your Zerg once the fight had been going on for a long time. So very important, these brain games. Now, at the very end, right, the long game, okay? The long game is basically at the very end, after you've actually kited the enemy for a long time. What does it look like? And what does a successful kite of the enemy look like? Okay, what do you get out of it? So the enemy is going to be burnt out, right? The enemy's sick and tired of your kiting. The enemy just wants to be done with, like, the enemy just wants to stop playing the game. They want to unplug the computer. That's the truth, right? They want to be done, okay? And the enemy is not going to want to be following or even trusting their caller's calls. They can have the best caller in the game. It doesn't matter. They're no longer going to trust that caller's calls. They're going to say, oh, that caller has an off day today. Even if they're one of the best callers in the game. They're going to say, oh, yeah, he's having an off day today. I'm not going to listen to him today, right? It's going to happen, I promise, right? And then on top of that, they're going to have a very weak front because every time you turn around and hit them, guess what you're hitting? You're hitting the first one or two guys you see, right? I keep mentioning that. The first one or two guys you see. Why? Because if you're hitting just the one or two guys you see in the front, guess who they are? They're all tanks. Or at least the high majority of them are tanks, right? So they're going to have a very, very thin front line, okay? when the enemy's front line becomes so weak that you're able to actually see how weak the enemy's front line is, right? Like they have very thin front line. At that point, it's time to stop kiting and it's time to now hold, right? Let them feel as though they actually finally are gonna get a good engage on you, okay? So you stop kiting and you just hold and you let them engage on you. All you gotta do is survive that engage and then it's GG. You won the fight, right? Why? Because if you allow them to engage you first, because remember, all they've been wanting for 20 minutes is to hit you, right? And you finally gave them that. It's like you're holding a cake over a fucking person's mouth and they smell it, right? And they're like, oh my God, I want that fucking cake. And then you kind of bring it closer to their mouth and they open their mouth and, you know, they can almost feel it, but then you pull it back and then they don't get that fucking cake, right? And they get so frustrated, right? They're like, I want the cake, right? And so after 20 minutes of that, then suddenly you're like, hey, look, here's the cake. You can have it, right? Have it. You can take a big bite. You know, they're gonna fucking nom that motherfucker down, right? They've been craving it. They've been wanting it, right? And so that's exactly what's gonna happen is the enemy's gonna full engage on you, and all you gotta do is survive that. And once they full engage on you, you survive it with defenses, whatever you gotta do. And then guess what? The enemy is literally inside of you. All you gotta do is turn and hit them. And when you turn and hit them, they don't have tanks to stop you. So you're gonna full delete their entire back line in one shot. Again, this is the non-stop highlight reel I've been talking about, right? I'm telling you guys, like the biggest fucking kills in this game have happened in exactly this scenario because the enemy loses all their front line and then they no longer can hold anything. But again, they bled out slowly, so they don't even realize that they don't have tanks. This is why they just, you know, took a giant bite out of that damn cake. Right? Because they didn't realize it. That's the point. Now, at that point, you want to end the kite, right? The fight is basically already over, right? But the enemy just doesn't know it. And that's why they take a bite out of that cake because they don't realize that the fight is over and that they've lost. Because if they did, they would just mount up and run away. Okay? But instead, they're going to go and fight. They're going to try to get that bite off the cake. And they're going to fail because they don't have tanks. And at that point, they're going to realize, oh shit, we don't have tanks. At that point is when you go nuclear, right? And then you just delete their entire backline and it's over, right? They have no tanks to hold and the fight's over, right? Again, the point of Kite is that you're going to make it a very slow fight, a very frustrating and annoying fight for the enemy. You're going to bleed them out one by one, deleting their front line only one by one, okay? While keeping your front line alive, and that's the key, right? Keeping your front line alive. You do this for a long time, they no longer have enough tanks to stop you from flooding their back line. And that's it. That's the whole strategy. That's the whole Kite strategy. It's a lot easier to explain or to talk about, right? Than it is to actually accomplish. I'm telling you guys, it's the hardest one to actually do properly because you need to have really, really high discipline players in your Zerg. Okay, you need to have players that listen to every call very well and players that can manage themselves, keep themselves alive, especially like the tanks and supports that are like peeling behind you. Those guys need to be able to keep themselves alive, man. They cannot go deep. They got to know their positioning. They got to be really good at that stuff, right? So all these things, very, very important for Kite. And that's it. That's it for today's episode. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, drop them in the chat right now. I am reading. And then I'll give you guys a minute because I know sometimes it's delayed. Let me see here real quick. We have, what's the next episode next week? We got battle mounts. That's right. We got battle mounts. All right. So next week we got battle mounts episode. That's gonna be a highly requested episode. I know a lot of people have been wanting me to talk about battle mounts because there's a lot of different battle mounts that people are excited about. And there are some battle mounts that are, in my opinion, underused. And so I think some of them are gonna come back into the scene with the changes in the meta that we're seeing right now. All right, I don't see any questions, comments, concerns. I appreciate you guys. Again, if you guys like the content, subscribe, like the video, comment on the video, whatever. If you guys got questions, I do have a Discord. It's not very active, but that's because we're a small community. Eventually, we're going to get a bigger community, and eventually it'll be more active. But if you want to be on the Discord, it's in the description below on YouTube. If you're on Twitch, you can scroll down. There's a link there, and you can get on the Discord. And mainly the purpose of the Discord right now is just so that you can be able to ask me questions if you want. Just message me there, do whatever, and I will answer any questions for you guys, because I enjoy talking about this, obviously. So I appreciate you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
What the hell do we do this for? I push you out, but you come back. That attraction, we can't fight that. Oh, keep telling myself that